Welcome to another episode of What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? I can't believe it. I think we're like up to episode 170 or something. It's just been a wonderful 2-year run, and I'm so glad that you are here with us today. As you know, or maybe you don't know, I'm your host, Karen E. Osborne. I'm author of 4 novels. My latest is a historical fiction, Through Grace. And my guest today is Indy Perro. Hey, Indy.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad that we could do this. This is really great. We're going to talk about it later, but he has like the coolest website, but we'll talk about that later. So he describes himself as a novelist, independent thinker, and a recovering academic, which I totally get, having spent 18 years in academia and then another 7 as an adjunct faculty member. So I truly understand that. He has 3 graduate degrees and has taught philosophy, religious studies, writing, and literature. Isn't that a cool mix? And his latest novel is Journeyman. Welcome, welcome. So before we get into your world and your books and your short stories, I am just so intrigued by your name. I mean, Indy, like Indiana Jones. So tell us a little, just tell us how you came up with it. Is it a real name? Is it your pen name? Tell us how you came about.
No, it is my pen name, and Indy. Certainly there's the connotation of being independent, and it's funny that you mentioned Indiana Jones because I didn't know if I wanted to mention this or not, but as a child, my favorite movie was Raiders of the Lost Ark, and I loved the idea as a kid growing up in a working class neighborhood in a industrial city in the Midwest where going to college wasn't something that you necessarily did, and so seeing somebody who's having adventures but who's well educated and who is speaks all of these different languages and that was exciting to me and I'm talking about being like 7 years old, 8 years old, you know what I mean, like young and impressionable. And when I reached a point in my academic career where I had to stop and take stock and decide what was really at stake in what I was doing and what was the reality of it, how was I making a life, building a life, holding myself accountable, creating something for my family, and creating a future for myself that was real and that was connected to other people and that wasn't just me chasing a dream or me following opportunities because they were handed to me, but actually taking responsibility for the choices that I was making and for the amount that I'd sacrificed to be there. When I did that, I had to give up on certain things, but I didn't want to give up on the idea of having a dream, right? And as you know, as a fiction author, you do have to nurture that inner child, that creative sensibility, right? You also have to be the boss and be the editor and hold that child accountable in real ways. But there is a way. I chose the name Indy to be independent, but there is a way in which I wanted to rekindle something I felt I'd lost. And then in terms of
Wow.
Perro,
Yeah, that is so cool. That is very, very cool. So you one of the things that you say, you grew up in a small Midwestern city, and I was on your website and looking at uh, photos and all kinds of things about the city, Central
mm-hmm,
City, which is where your stories take place, right?
correct. Yes.
And so tell us about this city that you made up and why you decided to make up a city.
So, you know, if you write about New York and I know you're from New York, and if you set your novels in New York City, even people who haven't been there, by the time they're old enough to read an adult novel, have seen thousands of images of New York, and they have an idea of what New York is. And one thing that I hate, that I absolutely hate, is like a television show that'll be set in New York, and they'll have like a police officer walking a beat in Times Square in one episode, and then like 3 episodes later, he's like walking the beat in Queens in like a housing project. Like that's yeah, I
Doesn't
can't stand it. And
happen.
it would never happen. And it's for people who are living in Indiana or, you know what I mean, Iowa, and who are watching this in a flyover state. And so I didn't want to be beholden to the expectations that people have. I also wanted to be able to bring that level of realism and be purposeful with my realism, right? As opposed to being forced to have the realism reflect the city itself, right? I want everything to be tonal. I want my environment to be a metaphor, right? An archetypal metaphor for the way that we imagine the city to be, but also to be able to undercut the way we represent it.
Oh, gosh, I feel like such a student because I decided to, I do set my stories in New York City and in Westchester County, which is just north of New York.
Right. Yeah.
But then for one of my books, I decided to make up a city, but for no such wonderful, amazing reasons. You just gave me. And my work in progress is back in that city that I made up. But now you've got me like thinking about it a little bit more, that the setting could have even more heft to it, a metaphor. Oh,
Yeah.
this is very cool. All right. So now how many novels have you written?
So my third one, I have two published, and my third one is coming out in the spring.
Congratulations. When
Thank
in
you.
the spring?
In May, the first Tuesday in May.
First Tuesday in May. That is a wonderful feeling, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. I have one coming out in November of 2024. It's just such a great feeling every time you get a new contract. So tell us about the title, tell us about the premise of this latest one, and then we'll talk about the one that's coming.
Okay. So Journeyman is the title of my most recent novel, which was the second. And Central City is the first, Journeyman is the second, and they both have two protagonists. They have a career criminal and a police detective who's a homicide detective. And there's a backstory there where when the career criminal was in college, the detective ended up sending him to prison. And it was a situation where he was sort of wrong place, wrong time, and got swept up in something. And once the career criminal got out of prison, they reconnected. He became a confidential informant, and there's a level of trust and respect with one another. And so in the novel Journeyman, the idea of the title is that Vincent Bayonne, who's the police detective, is a journeyman detective at this point. And he's reaching a point in his career where he's turning a bit of a corner. And King Culpa, who's the career criminal, is becoming that journeyman criminal, where he has to face who it is he's become and what that underworld has made him.
Wow. So a real nexus for both of them.
It is, yeah.
And are they in the novel that's coming out in the spring?
That's Body Count, and that's the third in the series, yeah.
Cool, cool. That is exciting. All right. And so when you think about, let's take the bad guy first, the career criminal first. When you think about him, what do you like about him?
So the first thing I have to say is that I take a little bit of an issue with you calling him the bad guy. he's
Okay.
I think what I like about him is that he's a decent human being. When you get down to it, in Central City, we see why he became a criminal, and he did it in order to find someone that he cared about, and to locate her. And she had been missing for quite a bit for his entire adult life up to that point, and but also getting out of prison, he didn't have a ton of choices, right? And he had been the reason he turned to crime in the first place was to put himself through college, which is, incredibly naive, and ended up being caught up in that life, and then doesn't have alternatives. But he's a smart guy who is making the best choices he sees in front of him.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And so now that our detective,
Mhm.
what do you like best about him?
I like that. So in the same way that the city is meant to be a metaphor, both of these characters are also, at least to my way of thinking, you have the career criminal is like this destroyer and redeemer figure, and the police detective is this preserver. And I like the
Mm.
fact that he's, in a fundamental way, he's a true believer, right? And in all of the ways that that's incredibly flawed, in all of the ways that that makes him weak at times, that makes him second guess his decisions, or pushes him into an area where things aren't working the way he wants them to be.
Hmm.
But I like that it's grounded in a sense of faith.
Yeah, yeah. Connolly always talks about true believers in his Bosch
Mhm.
books and his Lincoln Lawyer books. He talks about the true believer. Yeah, right. And so you also have a short story that's just gotten published that's
Yeah.
out.
Welcome to the Party is a short story that uh, is it goes back in time with Vincent Bayonne, and he's a just out of Vietnam. He's been on patrol for just around a year, and it's a night when a blizzard hits, and they're escorting a politician or someone who's running for local office, and they escort him to the VFW. And then they end up getting caught in there, and they find a body in the snow, and there's chaos ensues, and it's humorous and different things.
When it's also humorous. Very cool. So how can people find that?
That's on Amazon. That's available on
Oh, it is
Amazon.
on Amazon also.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, very good. And what's the title?
Welcome to the Party.
Welcome to the Party. All right, excellent. Are you guys writing this down? I hope all of you out there are writing this down. Or you can go back and listen to the interview again. I always like to ask about books that have helped shape you as a writer or as a person. So we heard about a movie that helped shape you. Is there a book that helped shape you?
Yeah, I mean, so I would mention two authors. Certainly, Cormac McCarthy is
Mm.
one of my all-time favorites, and Blood Meridian would be his book that really blew my hair back. And it was, I mean, that's like a Led Zeppelin moment, right? Where you like, I didn't know you could do that, right? I was young enough, I was impressionable enough, and it's so different. It's so unique. And there are moments. I mean, that's a book that I read every few years, and return to.
Wow.
Yeah. Um, then Elmore Leonard is the other author I'd mentioned,
Yeah.
who's more similar to my style of writing. Um, and I think he's so smart. I think he's such a clever writer who's blending humor with very serious issues, but there's also a level of realism, right? As far fetched as his stories might get, or as weirdly intertwined, there's like
Yeah.
a pinpoint level of realism that he brings to life.
That's a great description. He's one of my favorite authors too. That's a great description
Thank you.
of his writing. So, are there some books recently that you've read that you could recommend to the audience?
There's There's a I'm currently reading Wallace Stegner's Crossing to Safety, which, as a recovering academic, there's some things in there that are really spot on and very clever. But it's a novel that's so sensitive, right? He's so sensitive to interhuman relationships, and um, I always I have a warm spot in my heart for that. It's not That's not necessarily what I do as a writer. And so that perhaps that's what draws me to it. I'm also reading the Max Allan Collins's Road to Perdition, which is a bit more mind candy as far as that goes.
Mm.
But I'm really enjoying it. I think that I love the movie. I'm not a graphic novel person. I know it was originally a graphic novel, but I do enjoy Max Allan Collins's writing as someone who likes crime fiction. And then the other thing that I just finished reading was Hypertextuality by Byung-Chul Han. And that is a book it's philosophy. He's a South Korean, he was born and raised in South Korea, but he teaches and writes in Germany. And his stuff is really accessible. It's it's short. They're often like 90 pages or 110
Mm.
pages. And it's all like he's talking about philosophy of the internet. He's talking about cell phones and how we use cell phones and our relationship to technology. And he's, I think, cutting edge as a philosopher today.
Wow. Yeah. And you were a philosophy major too, right? You have a degree in philosophy?
So one of my graduate degrees is in comparative literature, and that in an Anglo-American context, a lot of times that crosses over to continental philosophy, and so that's where what I was working in, and I went from religious studies to comparative literature, and it was all like it sounds like I was super scatterbrained or whatever, and maybe I am, but it was all one project that it just kept moving me in it.
Pieces all fit for you.
Well, but also the career was pulling me that way, right? The other
Ah.
forces, the university was pulling me that
Mm.
way,
Mm.
and to get me to kind of fit and conform into the project, um, which didn't ultimately work out. So,
All right. You got a new wonderful life, right?
I got no complaints. Don't get me wrong at all. I got no complaints.
So how can our audience find you? How can they not just see your beautiful website, which you said to me that you weren't that happy with, but I find it so intriguing. I really liked it. I thought it felt intimate. You
Thank you.
know, yeah, it felt like, okay, he wants me to know him. He wants me to understand him. So I really liked that. It didn't feel like, oh, I'm marketing. It felt like
Okay, yeah.
come in and see what I'm like and see why I think the way I think and see what makes my books tick. You know, I thought it was very intriguing. So you're sold now on that too, right? So tell us how they can find you.
Okay, so there are the two. I've indypro.com, which is my personal website, and centralcitybooks.com, which is about the world of the books. And the two are linked. You can go from one to the other and back and forth quite easily. And there's a ton of cross pollination with that. And yeah, I'm really glad to hear you say that because there is a public, working in publishing, you have all of these influences that are pulling you one direction or another, and they want more marketing. And I keep coming back to that I want these to be about the project. I want them to be about the books and the ideas. So I thank you for that. So you can find me both of those places. You can contact me through the websites, but I'm also on Facebook, Twitter. It's at Indy Perro, Indy Perro author on Facebook. I'm on the Tickety Talk and different things like that.
Great. All right. Well, this has been a fun conversation. I was really looking forward to meeting you. And I hope that you have enjoyed this conversation. I hope that you will follow Indy. Go find him, follow him, like him, read his stuff, read his books. And I hope that you're already following me on Facebook and YouTube and Instagram and Twitter and even LinkedIn, but not on Tickety Talk yet. Thank you so much, guys, for being with us. And we'll see you next week in the next episode of What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? Have a great week, everybody.
Thanks.